Hey there, adventurers! As you gear up for your next outing, whether just a few hours or a full weekend, keep the Adventure Smart 3 T's in mind. Trip planning, training, and taking the essentials. One key essential? A first aid kit. These kits come in all shapes and sizes, whether you grab a fancy prepackaged one from an outdoor store or play mad scientist and create a custom kit of your own. Just ensure you bring the right stuff, and unless your trail buddy just happens to be a surgeon, ensure you're trained to use it. So don't be unequipped. Follow the Adventure Smart 3 T's and make sure you bring a first aid kit and know how to use it. In an emergency, call 911 and stay put until help arrives. There's no charge for rescue.
Welcome to the BC Search and Rescue Association's Adventure Smart Expert Webinar Series. Hello, everyone. Thanks for logging on. I'm Scott Montague from Coquitlam Search and Rescue, and I'm be acting as your human LLM for Zoom and YouTube tonight. Our guests, Peter Pilarski and Steve Jones, are here to answer your questions on using AI for wilderness trip planning. Be sure to pop your questions into the Zoom Q&A rather than in ChatGPT. We'll answer as many as we can, either live or online. If you wish to remain anonymous, just mark your question as such. Also, keep an eye on Zoom's chat box for links. And please don't be shy with those reactions button throughout your mid-journey. So let's compute some enthusiasm and use those reactions to welcome the lady who everyone knows as a gem, and I know as the lady who grokks the Adventure Smart world, BC's Executive Director of Adventure Smart, Sandra Riches.
Hello, hello. Thank you for that that might be one of the most unique introductions that we've had. And I see our guests laughing, so they caught those puns, if you will. So did most of us, actually. Thanks, Scott. I appreciate it. And thanks, Peter and Steve, for joining us. But before we get to you, I just have a few things to share. Thanks to everyone who's joining us in the audience tonight. You know, I know it's summertime, and we've kicked off with a few things. And no matter where you are in the province, in the country, or outside of Canada, I appreciate your time tonight. This allows us to have a chance to connect, for you to learn, for us to learn as well, and have conversation about a few things that have surfaced lately. I know Steve has a lengthy history in this realm. Some of us, it's new, and we may skirt and use it here and there with a few things, but this is a unique situation we have here tonight to hopefully clear up some mud and see where we can go and ask two experts some great questions. I know you've got some queued up already before they even share. Before we get going tonight, we love to know where you're sitting. So if you could let us know where you're sitting, please, in the chat, and let us know where you are in the province, the country, or outside of Canada. I'm joining you from beautiful Ontario this evening. I'm here visiting family, very grateful to do so. And originally from BC, I'm usually in North Vancouver and up in Whistler, but love to see where you're all coming from. I know I have a few special guests in the audience, so thank you for joining us. And as you let us know where you're sitting, I have a few things to share with you before I introduce our guests. So in British Columbia, we have 78 search and rescue groups. And on those groups in British Columbia, we have 3,200 search and rescue volunteers. They're all unpaid professionals. Scott is one of those volunteers. Thank you for your service, Scott. And they respond to 1,960 search and rescue tasks every year, just in British Columbia. All of that information, the tasks really, and how we can help outdoor enthusiasts is some of the reasons why the BC Search and Rescue Association created Adventure Smart 20 years ago. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary throughout this anniversary year. And based on our provincial success, the program went national in 2009. So we're very fortunate there. In British Columbia, we truck along in many different gears, and we work a lot with partners using search and rescue data to create special initiatives. And that really keeps us moving and meeting the needs and following the trends that really arise quite regularly. In British Columbia, those volunteers actually donate their time and dedicate their volunteerism with more than 500,000 hours a year. We've looked into some stats lately as we kick off our fiscal year, which started in April. We look back to 2024, and more than 500,000 hours are volunteered by the likes of Scott and all the other 3,000 plus unpaid professionals. Quite a commitment. It's really quite amazing. BC Adventure Smart is here to enhance awareness of you, for you, and so that we can really reduce the impact on search and rescue and add to the safety culture in British Columbia. So thanks to you for doing that with us tonight, because you're helping and you're sharpening your pencil. Last, and then I'll introduce our guests, the top 3 reasons for search and rescue in BC. And I'd like you to think about these as you plan your next adventure and how you would address them, manage them, mitigate them. Number 1 is injury across the board. If you're a hiker, mountain biker, paddler, doesn't matter, or winter activity enthusiasts, injury, lower extremity. So think about how you could manage that if it did happen to you, because that's the number 1 reason people call search and rescue. Number 2, getting lost or disoriented. Hopefully you know how to navigate. If not, there's some great courses out there. Map and Compass is a great way to go and learn how to route find and navigate. Number 3, exceeding abilities, decisions, group dynamics, lots plays in that role. So we have a lot to think about as we go through and lead up. Stick around to the end. We have 2 great prizes. The first one will be a Zoleo. We have a Zoleo communicator device to give away tonight and some free time for that subscription, thanks to Zoleo. And also just released the 2nd edition of 105 Hikes in and around southwestern British Columbia by Stephen Hugh. Our first guest tonight is Steve Jones. He is a tech CEO and a background in engineering physics and over 18 years of product leadership on data-driven and AI-powered technologies. He currently leads a company focused on database security for the AI market, a finalist in both the Lovable AI and Vancouver AI hackathons. Steve is also writing a book, which is going to be really exciting, that explores key AI challenges like hallucinations and temporal confusion to help policymakers, business leaders, and curious minds like us and you navigate the ever-evolving AI landscape. Our second guest tonight is Peter. Peter is a seasoned strategist with 20 years of experience in digital marketing, communications, and government relations across a range of industries. I've seen Peter speak at a number of tourism conferences. Well worth your time if you ever get a chance to hear Peter speak. He's passionate about simplifying technology and helping others embrace innovation. Peter believes that while AI will bring disruption, organizations that take a systematic, fact-based approach paired with strong change management can unlock its full potential. His mission is to demystify, hopefully that's what you can do for me tonight, Peter, demystify AI, empowering individuals and businesses to navigate this evolving landscape with clarity and confidence. So as I hand over the stage to Steve, Steve's going to start. Steve and Peter will present to you this evening, and the stage is yours, and I can't wait to listen and learn myself. Thanks for joining us, and we appreciate your time.
Excellent. Thanks, Sandra, for the kind introduction. And I assume you can see the slides.
You bet.
Excellent. So I'm Steve, as Sandra introduced, and I'm going to start by acknowledging that I'm presenting from the traditional unceded territory of the Comox First Nation tonight. We're going to start the presentation off with a section by Peter, actually. So Peter, I think you have control.
Perfect. Thanks so much for having me. So my job today is to, as Sandra said, try to demystify this whole AI conversation a little bit. I like to tell stories. I like to try to kind of give things personas and sort of make it feel real for people. So before we get into that, though, I think I'm actually one slide over. My bad. I have this sentence on here that says, good things come to those who, and there's a missing word. So as I talk about the attention is all you need paper, if you don't mind in the chat, just filling in what you think the word is, and we'll come back to that sentence and I'll explain why I included that sentence in there. So good things come to those who, I think hopefully all of you will know the answer. But really this AI conversation, this isn't actually all that new of a technology. AI has been around for a long time. In fact, in the 1950s, the term artificial intelligence was coined by a group of scientists who were trying to figure out artificial neural networks, sort of trying to duplicate the way the brain works by creating essentially what are called neural networks. Now, there's an interesting history in Canada about AI research because after the 1950s into the 1960s sometime, all AI research stopped. And we went through a period called the AI winter. And really what happened was these leading researchers figured out these neural networks, but technology hadn't caught up. We hadn't digitized the world's information. We just didn't really have the infrastructure to do anything with it. But what happened was actually a lot of scientists in Canada, many scientists in Canada actually, started in the 1980s, started to take on this research again. Compute started to catch up. The technology started to catch up, and really throughout the 80s and the 2000s and onward, the technology really started to take shape, and artificial intelligence started to show up in early research. But in 2017, Google came out with a paper that's called the "Attention is All You Need" paper, and that was really a transformative paper that really got us to where we are today in the AI space. Because in the "Attention is All You Need" paper, they came up with this concept of this generative pre-trained transformers. So generative, it just means it generates new content. Pre-trained means it's pre-trained on a large corpus of data or a large data set, and transformer means self-attention, or to understand context and relationships. And this transformer technology really has led to the AI that we know today. And in fact, generative pre-trained transformer is actually GPT in the Chat GPT. So that sort of gives you a bit of context in terms of where Chat GPT comes from. So I'm just seeing in the comments, and I see that everybody got the word "wait" right. So I'm glad nobody said "Go Oilers," because that's what I would have said. But you're right. The word is "wait," and we all know that. And why do we all know that? Because we've all probably seen this phrase over and over and over again, right? So, and I like to put this in here when I'm explaining what a large language model is and how it works, because large languages are pre-trained on this large corpus of data, and it's seen this sentence many, many times. And so when you're working with a large language model, what it's doing is it's actually just predicting the next word based on the words you put before it. And it's going to predict the word "wait" likely 100% of the time. And that is really excellent. However, when we're backcountry skiing, or we're hiking, or we're going to places where there's not a lot written about these things, the chances of it predicting correctly goes down drastically. So I think it's a good example of just, when we're doing things that are very common knowledge and things that a lot of people know, we can likely expect sort of good results from AI and ChatGPT and tools like it. But when it comes to things like that it may not know, and it's not necessarily in its pre-training as much, that's when we might start to get things like hallucinations, and we'll talk about that in a second. But that's sort of conceptually, I think, in terms of a large language model, some foundational stuff. So I want to take us on a trip to the library. And at the library, we have a librarian. We have two librarians, actually. And one librarian is called Google. And Google, the librarian Google, is like our typical experience going to the library. Because we may go to the library and we may ask the librarian, hey, I'm looking for a book on backcountry camping in British Columbia. And the librarian might say, oh, our outdoor adventure books are over there on the bottom. Just go look over there. You'll probably find your book. And that's kind of like the experience when you're on Google, right? You go Google something, you get all these blue links, and you have to kind of go searching through those blue links to find what you're looking for. A large language model, on the other hand, the librarian's kind of read every book. And kind of knows what's in all of those books and could just give you the answer, right? So that's just, I like to kind of just point out to people kind of that difference between the large language model experience and the traditional Google experience. But really what's happening is everything's being what's called tokenized. So all of your words are basically being turned into numbers, and those numbers basically are going into a large calculation. And there's a statistical calculation as to what the next token is based on the tokens that you put in. And so that's sort of what's happening on the back end. It's way more complicated than what I'm explaining. But essentially, it's turning your words into numbers, doing some math, turning it back into words, and all it's doing, it's just a big prediction machine, and it's just predicting the next word based on the words it sees before. And there are a couple things to understand about tokens. Is number one, if we put a lot of information into a large language model, we might butt up against what's called a token limit, because a large language model can only handle so much information at once. And when we start to butt up against a token limit, it could start to make mistakes, and it could start to hallucinate, and it could start to get things wrong. And that's when problems start to happen. And so I've just sort of teased it a little bit in terms of some of the ways problems might happen when we're using a large language model. But we'll get into a little bit more detail in a little bit. But what I want to point out to people is actually large language models are a lot like humans, because humans also hallucinate, make mistakes, forget things, or remember things incorrectly. So don't be too hard on the large language model is what I always tell people because you're not perfect either. I do want to say though, that's a traditional large language model that I was talking about, which is really just this big prediction machine. But in today's AI tools, we actually have a number of different models within, let's say, a paid ChatGPT account. So we have a traditional large language model, which would be like your 4.0 model or your 4.5 model. But now we have something called also reasoning models. And reasoning models in like a ChatGPT would be like an O3 model or an O4 mini high model. And so within a ChatGPT tool, if you're paying for it, you actually have more than one ChatGPT type of tool. And reasoning models are actually really cool because they can actually go and they can go search the internet. They can go and go through multiple steps to answer your question. So they can actually kind of reason, if you will, or think through your problem in a little bit more detail and come back with more accurate information. And then we also have another model inside most AI tools now. It's called deep research. And a deep research actually will go and execute multi-step research. It can call tools. It can pivot if it finds new information. And so this is what we are starting to call in the AI space kind of early agentic capabilities because it's pretty smart and it can kind of pivot on the fly and do all of these things. So these are the three models. And really, when we use a paid version of a ChatGPT, let's say, and we use all of these models together, it actually increases our likelihood of getting better results and better information. However, when we use free AI models, we're using old technology that doesn't have any of these capabilities and is much more likely to make mistakes. And so, doesn't have internet search capability, for example, in other things. And so, but similar, all of these models can still make mistakes. So even though they can get you closer to the better answer, we still have to be the human in the loop and we have to verify the information
Peter,
that gives us. Yep.
agentic. What is that word?
So agentic basically is the concept of agents that can take actions on our behalf. And so really, if you think about it, can actually go and make a decision. So when I use a deep research model, it may go search anywhere from 20 to 100 websites, and it may come back with a 100-page report on whatever it is I'm looking for. And it's actually going to decide which websites to search, which information to grab, how to put the report together. So it can actually think and take steps on its own. By the way, Scott, we are moving into the agentic future. And so the AI tools we know today are like really just the beginning steps of agents, which are going to be able to take actions on our behalf and do a lot of the work that hopefully we all hate doing. So we can spend more time hiking and enjoying ourselves.
I'm looking forward to that.
Me too. Over to you,
Excellent.
Steve.
Thanks, Peter. So what I'm going to talk about now is some potential use cases. And we are going to spend a lot of the presentation today talking about how AI can cause problems when you're doing trip planning. But we'd start off by talking about some of the good use cases, some of the things that might be useful, where it's not as dangerous to rely on AI. And a lot of these are basically brainstorming use cases. So I've got a prompt here, provide a list of 10 hikes that can be done as a day trip from Vancouver that lead to pristine lakes. And it's, the first one is Garibaldi Lake, which is a fairly obvious choice, but it goes through and it lists a number of different options. Now, you shouldn't rely on these entirely. You should use this as a starting point for your brainstorm. You might say, well, I've already done Garibaldi Lake, but the second or third option might be one that you hadn't heard of before. And that's when you can, do a bit of a deeper look and see if that is indeed an accurately described trip and something that you would be interested in exploring. So it's great as a brainstorming tool. Along those lines, it can also be used as a brainstorming tool to consider potential risks. Now, when you're planning a trip, start with your 3 T's, start with the 10 essentials, start with all of those formal guides for making your plans. But if you're like me and you like to be extra prepared for anything that might happen, it's fun sometimes to use these AI tools as brainstorming partners to imagine scenarios that you might not have thought of. Now, in the first prompt, I say, I'm going to do my first overnight backcountry camping trip. Provide me a list of things that might go wrong that I haven't have thought of. The first 20 things are pretty typical, probably things that you have thought of already. But what you can do is you can go back and you can say, go deeper, come up with some more creative ideas. And now it's coming up with some things that maybe if you haven't gone backcountry camping before, you wouldn't have thought of. So it's listed, for example, condensation in your tent or your sleeping bag can be a problem. And I'm about 6 feet tall. Our tent is very small. And I can definitely, say that the condensation is a massive problem that I hadn't thought of before I got into backcountry camping. But if you're doing a multi-night trip, this can be a real issue where your foot bag just gets wetter and wetter each night. So having AI can, maybe alert you to some of these things that you hadn't thought of ahead of time. It also points out zipper failure can be an issue. So you might look at your backpack and say, you know what, if that zipper failed, it would have a really hard time actually getting out. I should bring some, some large clips or whatever is needed to safety pins to hold that together. And what's kind of fun is you can keep asking it to go further and further, and it'll come up with more and more, arcane things. So, it might inform you about various, hantavirus in a caves and abandoned cabins and stuff that you might not have been aware of before. I find that the tools, they seem to have read a lot of stories about people that have been isolated in the wilderness for a long time. So, they tend to suggest that, if you're isolated for a month, start to, hallucinate or whatever. But you can also, if you just ask it, more and more creative things, it gives you a bunch of stuff that you probably hadn't thought of before. Are you going to have an allergic reaction to packaged food? A lot of people, when they start getting into backcountry camping, the very first time they're eating one of those dehydrated food packages is when they're 20 kilometers from the car in the middle of the woods. This is a good reminder, maybe if you're going to try an entirely new type of food item, to try it out in the safety of your home first. Also, some people are not aware that toxic algae blooms can be a real risk, and these are blooms that are not necessarily the toxins are not necessarily treated by your traditional treatment methods. And especially if you're going into areas where you haven't been backpacking before, this is a good reminder that might be something you want to look at. It gives some funny suggestions too. It's saying, if you have to hitchhike and you've come out of the woods after a few days, you might scare off people who would give you a ride due to your poor hygiene. So just lots of creative stuff that you might not have thought of before. And again, the idea isn't that this is an authoritative source. Some of these might be wrong, some of these might be hallucinations, but it's been trained on so much data, it can give you some creative ideas that you might not have thought of before. One that it came up with that I had never heard of before today was if you're hiking in certain areas in the north where there's thawing permafrost, some of the permafrost, it can actually result in a release of methylmercury, and that might be a danger for your water source. I have to look into that one some more, and I'm not planning a hike in the far north right away, but it's an example of how these things can kind of help in your brainstorming process. And I thought the last one was interesting too. It pointed out that autocorrect might replace a waypoint name in your trip plan if you're not careful, and that might lead you astray. It's also great for brainstorming food and meal ideas. If you've got, a few dietary restrictions, or you've got a few things on the shelf and you're trying to figure out how to get a bit more creative. If you're tired of eating the same old dehydrated food night after night. And again, here the idea is it's giving you an idea. There's no harm in getting an idea, and then you can look into it yourself, make sure it's going to be, cooked in a food safe way, and it's going to be, appropriate for your diet. It's fun to use to identify things. The models are getting better and better at recognizing what species of plants and animals are. Do not rely on it to determine if something is safe to eat. So, don't rely on it to say, hey, is this mushroom safe to eat? But if you're just curious, like what kind of crab is this or what kind of insect is this, it might point you in the right direction. I will note when I did this test, I was getting inconsistent answers from the models. I eventually used one of the advanced reasoning models that Peter was talking about. You can see in the bottom here, it says it thought for 51 seconds. So this is one of those models that does a lot of analysis and goes on the internet and searches for lots of images. And I believe it did correctly identify this as a northern kelp crab, which is something I hadn't heard of before. And finally, it can provide some reasonable answers for general knowledge. So stuff that is very common, like fitness plans or general hiking advice. It tends to be more accurate on those things, and there tends to be less risk with using that type of data. So if you want some good, some inspiration for how you can get in shape for hiking, it'll give you some pointers, and then you can work with your physiotherapist or fitness trainer to verify if those are valid and appropriate. And go from there. I'll now hand it over to Peter as we start to get into some of the downsides and risks.
Perfect. Thank you, Steve. So yeah, as we've been talking about a little bit, I think hallucinations are probably the most well-known and well-documented problems with these large language models and these AI tools. And I just want to point out to one fun, maybe if you're not a lawyer, not so fun, but fun cases that have actually happened all over the world. And there's many in the United States. And apparently there's actually a whole website of fake cases that lawyers got in a lot of trouble for. So have been cases in the United States where lawyers are preparing for their case and they rely on ChatGPT, and it literally made up all of the case law in their preparation. And not being good lawyers, they didn't double check their work. They just handed it to the judge. And there's been some pretty high profile lawyers that have gotten into a lot of trouble for not doing that. So, they can literally just make things up. And in fact, these tools are actually designed to answer your questions and to satisfy the user. And so if it doesn't know the answer, it's going to give you an answer anyways. And that is a problem. That's how they're designed. Now, I will say hallucinations, I think to Steve's earlier slides, sometimes can be very positive, incredibly creative, and can come up with some really creative things. But when it matters and when the risk is high, I would never rely purely on the response of any AI model. Otherwise, you could be in trouble.
So there isn't a switch where I can say, I'm trying to write a novel about something happening in Legoland, and can you help me with that? Versus I need to have practical, real knowledge about something. I can't actually sort of tell it, you can only give me true answers.
I mean, there are some, I would say, prompting techniques where you can try to get closer. But it's still, I think when the risk is high, when the stakes are high, I think that it's always advisable for that to be that human in the loop to double check and to verify. In fact, I just listened to a podcast actually when I was taking my dog out this morning, and there was a researcher talking about these deep research models saying, they're really fast at producing these incredible reports, but the ability to verify the facts isn't that fast. So is it really speeding us up, right? And if you're putting out sort of papers and you're basing it on these reports and you haven't verified the information, that could be reputational risk. But certainly, if you're going to go into the backcountry and do something that has some dangers in it, that's that completely different and a pretty big risk, right? Certainly, when you're using free tools, especially, there are training data cutoffs, and so what they do when they train these models, they train them to a point, and then they ship them out and they make them available to people. And usually, I mean, the paid models and the better models, they can go and search the internet and sort of still find new information. But certainly, the free models, which honestly a lot of people are still using out there, have training data cutoffs. They may not have access to the internet, so could be a lot of old information in there that it's sort of accessing, which could be problematic for your trip planning as well. And then one of my favorite things here is sycophancy. And so that is actually the term here is unquestioning agreement with flawed ideas, reinforcing biases, overly positive responses to negative statements. And I actually just posted here a blog that OpenAI had, I think only about 2 or 3 weeks ago, about that very thing, because they did an update to the model, and it was sort of doing this. It was telling everybody how amazing all their ideas were and how great they were doing. And my wife was actually telling me, "Oh my God, this thing is just speaking to me. It's telling me how awesome all my ideas are." And then I said, "Sorry, it was actually designed wrong, and it may be telling you that your awesome ideas or your ideas are awesome when they may be dangerous and not so good." So ChatGPT since fixed that problem, or at least they say they fixed that problem, but they're constantly updating models. They're constantly changing things. They're constantly evolving. And so if you used it yesterday and it didn't have sycophancy and you used it today, it might be a different tool that you're using and you may not be aware of that. So there's a lot of things. These things don't act the same every day. They're kind of weird as a technology.
Does that also change like whether or not I'm using ChatGPT versus Gemini versus Grok? Are they all at sort of different stages or have their own idiosyncrasies?
That's right. They all have their own idiosyncrasies. They all have different sort of personalities built into it. They all have different guardrails put into it, different philosophies. So, we're really at the mercy actually of the people designing these tools and how they decide to give them as a personality. And obviously the tool providers are trying to do their best, but they can make one change and all of a sudden the model behaves extremely differently and it's problematic and it can do some weird things. So, even I do AI training every day, all day. And I can tell you there's times where one day it's acting one way, one day it's acting a different way, and it's giving wonky and weird answers. So like the technology is a bit weird, and that's actually my next my next statement here. So I have this funny picture here of this black box with a child's head sticking out and these knobs sticking out of it, and I put that picture in there. It's one in my presentations I always give because Jan LeCun, who's the head of AI for Meta. He talked about artificial neural networks being like a black box with millions of knobs sticking out of them that get adjusted by algorithms to produce outputs. And the reason he called it a black box is because there isn't a single AI researcher that actually knows what happens inside that artificial neural network with Definity. So we don't actually know how these things work. So, they reprogram him, they tell them to act differently, and then they do weird things. And so we're in this kind of period of time when these models are being developed and iterated all the time. And again, they can just say things that are weird and do weird things. In fact, Anthropic, which is one of the leading model providers, just did some testing on a model that they've just released. Now, I'm assuming that the release they put out there isn't doing these things, but in the sort of testing phase, the model actually threatened to reveal the engineer's affair to avoid being shut down. And so that's not good. So just I guess also be careful what you're feeding the machine, because you never know what it's going to do and where it's going to go from there. But they're just weird things, and they act weirdly. I wanted to share this quick slide here. This is actually was leaked from OpenAI, the company that makes ChatGPT, and it's sort of where we're going. And Scott, you asked the question about agents, and so this is sort of a path to what's called artificial general intelligence, which all of these leading model providers are sort of going towards. And so when ChatGPT, when it was released to the world in 2022, that was sort of the level one when chatbots became kind of available, and these are conversational AI tools. Then we started to get these reasoning models, and these reasoning models were very much what we're talking about now with these O3 models and models like it. We're now in this new age of agentic AI, which is systems that can take actions. And then we're on our way to a path towards innovators, AI that can like literally invent new things and come up with new things. And then level 5, which is the one that always freaks me out, is AI that can do the work of an organization. So, that's I'm actually putting this slide on here because, by the way, many researchers in the AI space think we're going to get to level 5 by 2027, 2028, 2030 at the latest. So we are on a fast path to a very different world. And so I'm only putting this here because I know some of you are business leaders as well. And so this is if you're not paying attention to AI today, you better be paying attention, because the world is about to be very different in the next couple of years. So this is a little bit less to do with hiking per se and backcountry activities. Finally, I'm going to actually read this because this is a blog I wrote a couple weeks ago, and I'm going to just read this quick snippet from it because as a person training and helping people adopt to AI, I'm noticing that people are sleepwalking into the unknown. And I really need people to wake up because the world is changing. So I wrote, there was a time when social media felt like a revolution. It gave everyone a voice, broke the monopoly of traditional media. It connected communities, amplified campaigns, and even reshaped destinations. And then quietly, and then all at once, it changed us. We learned that the very algorithms designed to connect us could also manipulate us, that engagement doesn't always equal truth, that technology doesn't extend human behavior, it shapes it. Now we stand at another technological tipping point. This time it's not social media, it's AI. This time the stakes are higher because AI isn't just changing how we communicate, it's changing how we think. And I want everybody to think about that, because we're all just taking the answers of AI as truth. And it's starting to shape the way we think. And so, when we're thinking about planning backcountry hiking trips or whatever, or if we're thinking about our businesses, we need to be mindful, and we need to not sleepwalk into this revolution that we're walking in, because we don't want it to shape the way we think. Back
Peter,
to you,
quick
Steve.
question, because I think you just explained it in a much more detail. I don't mean to simplify it, but do you think it's giving a lot of us a huge false sense of security?
I think it's giving us yes, I think it is. And I think we're relying on it incredibly fast on a lot of things. And the research shows that it sort of brings kind of bottom and middle performers up in terms of sort of making them closer to top performers. But again, to your point of the false sense of security, it's creating these sort of falsenesses in the workforce, and sort of, people are doing things like shadow AI use and not telling their employers that they're using AI because they're scared that the employers is going to tell them they're not allowed. So there's a lot of conversations that need to be had, not only in the workforce, but I'm going to share in a second here. When you're with your hiking group planning your hiking trip, you should be asking, where did you get that information? Because if it was from AI, you probably want to think about, we need to verify that and make sure it's correct, right?
Yeah, as that conversation in the group. But we talk a lot about those group dynamics and those conversations that everybody should have. And I think early days, pre any of this, let's go back to hiking clubs and alpine outdoor groups where we had conversations and were mentored by other people who had field experience, if you will, versus a lot of people are relying on this technology to really help them get out there. And I've said for a long time, easy access to outdoor recreation trails, mountains, parks gives people a false sense of security. This is icing on that cake, and I don't think it's a good cake in the sense of that false sense of security is
100%.
double now. It's yeah, it's tricky. Okay,
It's
thanks.
kind
Do
of
you think
it's supercharged if you think about it.
That's a great way to put it. I'm going to steal that. It's supercharged. Yeah, yeah.
do you think that people have, and I don't know whether or not there's been there would probably be a poll, I imagine, that would go out and speak to this, but do people understand the risks of AI when they pop open Grok or Gemini and they ask a question? Do you think in general the general public understands that it's quite often just wrong?
Honestly, people are nowhere in their understanding. Like we are, in my opinion, at near zero in our understanding, based on just the amount of people I work with, and people don't understand even that if I use the paid tool, it gives me additional sort of capabilities versus a free tool, and all these date cutoff dates and all. People don't know this stuff, and so people are just everybody's excited and they're telling people about it and they're using it. But they don't know what they don't know. And so there's a huge, huge, huge learning curve here. I'm going to be
They
talking
don't know
about
what they don't know, but they're trusting what's available.
Yeah.
And they're placing faith in what's available because it's available and it's accessible. And a
That's right.
good, like you said too, when I saw you speak at the Tourism Industry Association of BC's conference, using the free version. So it's very accessible, isn't it? And they're placing faith in all of that and they're trusting it. And here you are sharing so much of this incorrect information.
It also seems very confident, right?
It's
The
extremely
answers
confident.
that come back sound like, yeah, I know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Extremely confident and extremely convincing, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, and with that, I will jump into some of the specific challenges. A few examples to kind of make this tangible of how this might go awry when you're using it in your backcountry trip planning. So we started with some useful examples, some ways you might use the tools to brainstorm and get creative ideas. The challenges that Peter talked about with hallucination. Some people say that it should have actually been called confabulation. It's this scenario where the model doesn't know what it doesn't know, and it presents information with the same level of confidence no matter what. Now, guardrails are put in place for a lot of the models where they will know when they should be careful about responding. One of the really interesting things about backcountry trip planning is the information is so local. So you can, for example, the model providers might say, be very careful when giving advice to a user about their heart conditions or medical conditions. But it's very hard for them to put appropriate guardrails in place when it comes to backcountry trip information because, as we all know, if we travel to various areas, the information about, trails in a national park in one country are very different than the information about trails in a provincial park in another country. And where in one area the trails might be very wide and very well, maintained, and you could, push a stroller down them. A trail in another area might actually require scrambling and not be marked at all and be very different. And because the AI system hasn't lived in the real world, it's hard for it to deal with that. So I'm gonna talk about a few of the quick challenges that we face here. One is that these models are trained on language. They're increasingly being trained on images. They're being trained on video. They're being trained on audio. The main models that we're using today have not yet been trained on maps. And so when you ask them questions about the world that require kind of a world model and that involve navigation, that often exposes a massive weakness. I had asked, one of the models a simple question about hiking the Joffrey Lakes Trail, and I'm currently in Comox. I appreciate we have some folks in the webinar from around the world. I'm currently in an area named Comox, and it started giving directions. It said, yeah, drive south on Highway 19. That was right. Then it says take BC 4 east. That's a little odd because that takes me to Qualicum Beach. And then somehow it teleports me over to the middle of the province, across the Strait of Georgia or the Salish Sea, onto BC Highway 97 North. There's no ferry involved. So this is complete nonsense. And it's really interesting because, you might ask it a different question and it'll give you a very convincing and oftentimes very accurate answer. But these kinds of complete nonsense get introduced, in the middle of your chat dialogue. So navigation is an area where it's very weak. And this was a simple route. This just requires highways and ferries. A lot of times when you're planning a trip, you need to go on logging roads. You need to be going potentially private roads. You need to be dealing with all of these complex things. So navigation is an area to use extreme caution, just to the trailhead. Another area is, Peter talked about the training cutoff dates. Not only are they, is the data cut off at the point where the model was trained, but even the data in the past, they don't necessarily have a good sense of when those trip reports were. All the previous trip reports kind of get just amalgamated together. And so when you're asking it something and it depends greatly on the season, it can often give you very bad advice. There's trails on Vancouver Island where, at some points of the year they're basically mud pits. Other points of the year they're very dry and you might not get fresh water, and that all gets a little bit lost and kind of muddied in the use of these models. So I asked this one about going to a hike to the top of Mount Currie. And that is a very high peak in this region that is still covered in a lot of snow, or at least there's going to be, some fairly extensive snowfields. And it basically told me, yep, pack your hiking boots, have a good time. Very dangerous advice. At this time of year, you need to have mountaineering equipment. You need to be prepared for full winter conditions almost. So that's another example of where using these models can lead you astray. We talked about navigation on the roads. Navigation in the backcountry, it's even more wild what these will suggest to you. So if you're familiar with the region, I was asking it how to get from Elfin Lake, I made a typo there, but Elfin Lakes to Garibaldi Lake. And it suggested in the middle of the trip on day 3, I would go from Rampart Ponds to Garibaldi Lake by somehow going to Mamcombe Lake, ascending the Neve, which is an ice field and glacier, somehow teleporting over the next ridge. And then I get to Garibaldi Lake and I'm going to stay at the campground. But that gets me to the wrong side of Garibaldi Lake. I guess they assumed I would just swim across the entire lake, and that's how I would do it. Even the distance is wrong. Even if you were a bird and you just flew in a straight line, that distance is too short. So this is, I think, something search and rescue teams are a bit concerned about. You can ask it a question about how to do something in the backcountry, and it's going to give you a very accurate, very comprehensive answer, lull you into that false sense of security. Maybe you ask it how to get to Elfin Lakes, and it's going to give you very accurate information because there's so many trip reports about that. I say maybe, I haven't checked. But it might do that, and you might have knowledge of how to get to Elfin Lakes and feel, well, if it told me that part, it's accurate. And then this next leg of the trip, it's probably the same level of accuracy, and it might lead you on a very wild adventure. And there have been some cases, I believe, already where people have been led on these kinds of misadventures and ended up in situations where they needed help. Another thing that has come up is they will give you incorrect information about the rules. So, I asked it, what's the best way to start a campfire at Semaphore Lakes? It went into an analysis and it said that you are allowed to have campfires there. That's not true. If you check the BC government website, it is a rec site and you're not allowed to have campfires at this location. So, don't rely on it for any kind of information where there is an official up-to-date source and where you could get in trouble if you trust it to give you the right rules.
And that's crazy. It even called that section campfire regulations. So it wasn't just trying to tell you how to make a campfire. I could understand if it was saying, okay, you need kindling, you need small pieces of paper, match, and it just gave you general ideas on how to build a campfire. But this one, it specifically went in and attempted to tell you the campfire regulations and got it wrong.
And this one was an advanced model, so it looked at the site, so it actually went to sitesandtrailsbc.ca, but still gave you the wrong conclusion. So again, like in these kinds of situations, great for creative brainstorming. When you need the answer to be right, go yourself to the source. They're creating images and stuff as well now. So this is, make a photo of someone using an ice axe to arrest their fall. That is not the right way to use an ice axe to arrest your fall. So, definitely want to be careful about that kind of information. So now I'll hand it back to Peter to talk about what you might do to instead.
Yeah. So, I mean, really, I mean, when the stakes are high, you need to confirm, you need to discuss, you need to agree. So I think, this group dynamics thing keeps coming up. And in fact, I have this guide here from a book, from a hiking trip that my buddies in one of my hiking groups want to go on this weekend coming up. And so I know, because one of my fellow hikers actually put a picture of the book that the information that he's telling us is verified source. We can have a discussion about it. I'm going to go probably all trails as well, and I'm going to probably go look at a couple of other websites, right? So, I think that's kind of the advice always, those group dynamics, is make sure, and especially if you have that person that's that trip planner and they're always just planning the trip and you're always coming along for the ride. Uh, Ask some questions. Where are you getting the information? Are you sure? Can I verify, right? Obviously, some good sources of information, DMO and government websites, official websites, guidebooks, avalanche.ca, Alpine Club of Canada, BC Mountaineering Club, etc., etc. Obviously, one of the best sources of information is go get some training, and actually spend time with people who are seasoned veterans and have spent time. Go with a guide if it's somewhere, pretty big or something completely different that you've never done. Yes, sorry, destination marketing, or now destination management organization, is what a DMO stands for. So, go to the verified sources where the stakes are high for those organizations, to make sure that they're giving you the most accurate information possible. That's what they're there for, right? So I actually talk to a lot of destinations that are pretty frustrated because they're hearing stories all the time. Maybe not backcountry hiking or adventure, but just, hey, ChatGPT told some tourists to go to this, I don't know, bar that doesn't exist, or this. So this is happening all the time, all over the place. So it's, we need to educate people on kind of the fact that these things happen and what to do about it.
Can I ask that you add BC Adventure Smart to that list?
Oh,
Wink,
sorry,
wink.
my bad, my bad. That was my bad,
I'm
Sandra.
just making a plug there. I just thought I better get that in there while I can.
That was a
Good
complete miss
list.
from me.
Good list, by the way. I had
Yeah,
my
thank
eagle
you,
eyes
thank
on.
you, thank you. Um, But I don't want to say that these tools aren't useful, because they really are. And these are incredible tools that can really do a lot of things. But I think the point I'm trying to make is you need to understand how they work. You need to understand what they can do well and what they can't do well, which is what we're trying to talk about today. And there's ways you can train them on some verified information to make them work better. So inside, for example, ChatGPT, there's sub tools called custom GPTs, where you can add information and you can give it instructions to follow the information in the custom GPT. In Gemini, they're called gems, and in other places. One of my favorite tools is called Google Notebook LM, and it's a tool that does what's called retrieval augmented generation. Basically, what Google Notebook LM does is you can put a bunch of information in there, a bunch of documents, YouTube videos, all different formats of information, and then you can just ask the model about questions about the information you put in there. So, for example, maybe I don't want to read that whole book about, I don't know, scrambling in the Canadian Rockies or whatever. But I have a PDF version. I can put it in there and I can ask it about, give me all the information about just this one hike or just this one adventure I want to go on. So it can help sort of sort through big amounts of information and sort of dispel it for you, but you still need to check. What I will say, this is sort of now my soapbox that I go on everywhere I speak all the time. Every single business and every single individual in the world needs to do these things. Number one, AI literacy. Don't sleepwalk into the AI era. Don't find out that your job is gone because it got replaced by AI or whatever. Get literate. Start to understand, because this is coming fast and it's going to be everywhere. It already is everywhere. Every single organization needs responsible AI's policies and principles. Like 5% of organizations I talk to have these. It's not good enough. And those responsible AI policies and principles actually lead to some incredibly robust and good conversations in your company with your staff, because you should be having conversations about those principles, getting buy-in from everybody, the group dynamics that we like to talk about. So, similarly, maybe if you have a hiking group or a backcountry group that you go on, maybe come up with some principles as well around how you're going to use responsible AI responsibly for your trip planning. Not a bad idea. Certainly an AI council or an AI working group, some kind of internal organization that's sort of looking at what's going on in the AI space, reviewing those principles every once in a while, making sure that everybody's using things well. putting in guardrails for the company, all those types of things, very important. And importantly, also every company and every business should have some kind of AI roadmap that includes some kind of vision or philosophy around their AI approach. So either they're on the bleeding edge or they're going to be laggards. Both things are okay, but it's important to kind of discuss and come up with where we stand on that spectrum. Those policies, a bit of an implementation plan, because like I said, there's a lot of this like shadow AI use going on. There's a lot of dangerous activities going on in your workforce as well, with people using tools in ways that you have no idea that could cause all kinds of problems for your organization.
Excellent. So I'm going to go through these pretty quick, but the next thing that we really wanted to share with everyone is just the being incredibly aware of the fact that the information that you're seeing online may now be fake. And so, we talk about the importance of going to guidebooks. We talk about the importance of checking that the information is verified and true. And how quickly trail information can change. I've seen some stuff in the comments about the fact that, even a guidebook goes out of date, and even government maps go out of date. One of the real dangers that we face now is that sources that we may have traditionally relied on may no longer be true. So someone may post pictures on social media that look like they're, recent pictures from my trip, and it turns out they're fake. So I'm going to go through these pictures quickly. These are all 100% fake. Not Photoshop that I edited from another photo. Just literally you put some text into the tool and say, make a bear eating a tent or whatever, and it spits out something like this. So, these, as I click through these here, just keep in mind that all of these are entirely fake, built from scratch by the AI tool. And so you could imagine that we may be entering an era where people start to post trip reports or, fake guidebooks that are authored with information that has errors in it and with pictures that are unrealistic. And that could lead you astray if you are relying on that information. Even have a few videos here. We'll see if this technology works. Here's a guy feeding a bear an apple. Not a good idea. And the video is not as far along as the pictures, but it's getting very close to the point where it would be something that might fool you, especially if you're looking on a mobile phone or a smaller screen. Someone might show a video of a stream crossing that is actually much more dangerous than it appears in the video. So this is something, someone, influencers talking about, oh yeah, I'm training so hard in the winter without, in my t-shirt, when they're not, it never actually happened, and encouraging people to maybe kind of copycat them and go into the wilderness and do these things. Now, hopefully no one's going to put a saddle on a grizzly bear anytime soon. But you could imagine people getting fooled into thinking that some activities are maybe safer than they are because they're relying on stuff that's entirely fake. So, the pictures and images are one thing, but you have to be aware that, entire websites, entire books, social media profiles, people that you're interacting with online and getting information about, they may be fake. And what would the motivation for that be? Well, it all comes down to, if you're trying to run an account where you want to get as many follows as possible, because if you get follows, you can get more money for ads and for sponsorships and all of that. There may be people that literally just set up entirely fake social media personas of people that don't even exist. And they post these images that look real and look fantastic. And they give information which maybe 80% of the time is quite accurate because it was generated by these tools, but the other 20% of the time is inaccurate. So we really all have to be super aware of where we're getting our information going forward. And that's where, authors that write local guidebooks, our local government agencies that provide official trail reports. These are the, Adventure Smart, all of these organizations we really need to support in this new era, because they provide such a critical service that's going to become even more important.
It's interesting that you mentioned the pictures and such. All of those pictures, obviously, it's the person riding the back of a bear was as an exception, but the rest of them, there are probably pictures like that out on the internet. Is this a case of people not wanting to, because if I did a search, I could find a picture of a bear in front of a tent. That's pretty easy, right? Is this a case of people just not wanting to pay for the usage of that picture, so they just have AI generate it because they didn't happen to have one of their own?
So I made those just like yesterday to prepare for this presentation. It's very quick and very easy now to make those images. So yes, there's a few reasons people might do it. One might be organizations that are selling gear or promoting a destination. I hope our local destination marketing organizations are all using real images and aren't using AI images, but someone could use it for that. Maybe someone trying to advertise a tourism destination. Or as I said, people just trying to build followers for other reasons because that gives them influence and reach, and there's monetary reasons why you would want to do that. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons why that might happen.
Nice. All right, I'm going to round it out here with a few best practices around leading AI. And I think leading your group, whether you're going to do something backcountry or leading your staff or your team, even if you're not the leader of your organization, if you are passionate about AI, you should be a leader and lead the conversation. And so certainly leading with literacy, and I mean AI literacy, but also just sort of, again, even what Steve was talking about, some literacy just around what's going on in the world, right? I like to tell people just assume it's fake. And that way you're not going to get yourself in a bit in trouble, right? There's a lot of videos and a lot of reasons why people would put stuff out there. I think that the number one skill for humans going forward is discernment. Unfortunately, we're in a world that is going to be extremely disruptive. And so literacy is obviously AI literacy, but also just sort of, pay attention to what's going on out there. Pay attention to the news. Pay attention to what it means. And sort of and be literate about the world that you're living in. So, again, don't sleepwalk into this new era that we're going into. Prioritize human oversight. In AI, we always make sure there's a human in a loop. So when we develop AI, responsible AI's policies and principles, there's always checkpoints on where the human is in the loop. Where's the human in the loop? That's constantly what we say. And you're writing your standard operating procedures and your policies to always make sure that there's that human oversight. And obviously, in when we're in the backcountry and we're doing adventure sports, especially important. If there's somebody that's been on that trail, or if you can see, somebody that's experienced, maybe that'd be a good thing to do. Or obviously the person that wrote the book and has been on the hikes is probably a pretty credible human in the loop at the end of the day. Important to foster that open dialogue. There's a lot of fear out there around this whole AI conversation for good reasons, many of which we talked about today. And so it's important to have those conversations. I'm going to just quickly share a little story. When I help organizations with AI adoption, I do a leadership survey and I do an employee survey. And I bring those two surveys together and I do a bunch of workshops with the leaders. And I had one organization where they said, we want to be the absolute leader in AI adoption. We want to be the innovators. We want to go. And half their employees were like, if you adopt AI, we're leaving your organization. And so we had a conversation that we needed to have. And so don't assume that you're an enthusiast and you love AI and all these things, or you hate it and you think it's the worst, that the people around you have the same feelings about you. So you need to have conversations. And again, same thing with the group dynamics. Don't assume everybody in your group, has the same morals, ethics, standards, sort of have the same literacy and understand this stuff maybe as much as you do, right? So important to have those conversations. And obviously promote continuous learning. We are in the most disruptive period in human history. I'm going to put it out there right now. And we're just getting started. So we're all in a continuous learning phase. And one of my favorite people to follow on in the AI space is a guy named Ethan Mullick. He's a professor at the Wharton School of Business. And he came up with this phrase, HR is R&D. And the reason he came up with that phrase is because at the end of the day, it's the individual users in your companies that are using the AI that will know best what the use cases are for their jobs to make their jobs better. And similarly, when you're in your group dynamics and you're planning a backcountry trip or whatever, it's the individual users of those AI tools that know how they use it, know what verifications they did, all of those kinds of things. And so it's important to sort of keep learning and learning how to use the tools better, verify all of those things. Certainly champion ethical, inclusive AI. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but make sure it's fair and transparent in the way you use it. Recognize and mitigate risks. So again, that's where clear guidelines come in, managing risks effectively, having backup plans, all those types of things. Empower and equip your team. So again, I speak to a lot of organizations where it's like the leader has the paid version and oh yeah, I'm not really sure what my staff use. Well, that's not really good enough because they may be using models that are unpaid and wrong and make all kinds of mistakes. And so you need to kind of equip your team with the right tools. or not, and they need to know what the rules are with respect to the tools they can use. Measure impact thoroughly, so align it with your core values and your goals, and assess regularly. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because I want to spend the most time on my favorite one here, which is lead by example. And so these two slides here that are a bit hard to read, but I'm going to read them for you. These came from OpenAI, and OpenAI did a presentation to guys like me that are sort of on the forefront of trying to adopt this AI thing. And they said that there are 4 strategies for successful development out of 250 enterprise companies that they put their ChatGPT to work with. Number one, executive sponsorship. So leaders sponsoring and saying we support AI use in our organization and sort of putting those guardrails and talking about it was a very big success factor. And there was 4 less obvious success factors. And the number one was executives actually using the tools. Because if you use the tools, that's how you learn what the tools do, what they're capable of, the mistakes they can make, and that's how you can lead effectively. And similarly, when you're doing, planning with your group, you using the tools yourself is how you're going to know what some of these mistakes can be, especially if you're experienced. Some of Steve's examples, if it's telling you to go here, but you've hiked there before and it's giving you crazy stuff, that's the only way to sort of firsthand experience a hallucination, for example, and understand what that feels like and then know what to do about it. And finally, if you're interested, I just put this slide up on my website. I have a whole bunch of resources. I write and podcast and do all kinds of things all the time, self-assessments. There's a free Tourism AI Academy. So feel free to jump onto that website and grab any free resources you have. I got a ton there on kind of adopting AI for your organization. I believe that is the last slide.
Excellent. Should we jump into the quick question there, Scott? Or
Yeah, there's a couple questions there. So let's start off with Chloe's question. So question for either you, Steve or Peter, or maybe I'll have you both chime in on this one. One of the hiking apps that are out there have been putting in AI features, and many of the different apps in general, not even just hiking ones, have been putting in AI features. One of the things that Chloe has pointed out is that it allows you to customize hiking routes by saying, make it a shorter route or make it a more scenic route or something along those lines. What do you foresee as being the ways that type of technology should be used? What are the pitfalls that might come from having AI help you in that manner?
I think I'll take a first attempt at this. I think it comes down to the basic thing that we've talked about through the presentation, which is look at AI as something that might give some ideas, and then verify whether those ideas are valid. I think you could imagine, it's pretty easy to imagine how it would be possible to design that type of an app and how that might actually be quite useful. But it's also easy to imagine how it might go awry. We've had some challenges in BC because so much of the trails vary so much, and they're just lines on a map when you look at it as a computer or in an app. But some of those trails require climbing gear, and others can be done in flip-flops. So we have had challenges in the past before AI where people would follow a line on a hiking app because all the lines look the same, and some were dramatically more challenging. And it became very challenging when people were doing loops because you get in, you're too far to turn around. Maybe you don't have enough water to turn around, but now it's too far to go forward. So I think with apps starting to maybe modify hiking routes and suggest ways to make creative loops, that would be the biggest concern I would have. And I would worry if people are relying on that when they're in the field. It should be something you kind of use ahead of time, see what the app suggests, and then look into it. And maybe it's going to be quite interesting, or maybe it's not going to be a good idea, or maybe it's something where you need to say, you know what, this might be a bad idea, so I need to plan that I can backtrack it at any point. That would be kind of my 2 cents. I imagine there's going to be some interesting stuff that comes out, but we just have to be careful when we're using it.
Yeah.
Peter?
Yeah, and I'll just maybe add to that and say, really what Steve is talking about here is AI should be your starting point, not your ending point, right? And so if you start with AI in your planning, you get some ideas, you sort of do some planning, and then you need to be the human in the loop. Maybe you need to ask some people, maybe you need to go to the books, you need to go to the websites and the sources. and really just plan ahead, right? So hopefully you're using it as your starting point. You're doing your planning. You're planning ahead. You're having your conversation with your group. You decide what you're going to do, and then. Hopefully then as a conversation, if you do it as a group like that, then hopefully you can avoid any pitfalls that might come from those apps. But, I would say for now, especially early days in this, assume it's going to make a mistake. Assume that it's going to hallucinate and it's going to do something wrong. That's probably the safest bet in terms of not getting yourself in trouble.
Sandra, if people were going to try this, because you're going to try it, right? And I'll probably try it for that matter. What's your advice for how prepared I should be? If I'm going to do something that's supposed to be a 12-hour loop according to the computer, what should I be prepared for if something goes wrong?
Well, it goes back to our basics, right? It goes back to our trifecta of safety, which is our 3 Ts. There's no question about it. So I feel people will fold this into that trip planning phase. I don't dismiss it. And Peter and Steve said the same thing. I really love what you just said. AI is a starting point, not your ending point. So I think as we all think about the 3 Ts, and we gently and consistently remind you of that. Sorry if you come to all these webinars, you've heard us say it 1,000 times. So I know it's habitual for you now. So trip planning, number one, and we want you to make sure you have the right training. Training could be going to one of Peter's sessions to learn more about AI. It could be reading Steve's book when it comes out. It can be joining our webinars. It can be taking an avalanche skills training course, a mountain bike course, a first aid course, navigation, communication, map and compass. That list goes on, right? So trip planning, training. And we never dismiss to take those essentials with us. Those will always go. At the very beginning of this webinar, you watched one great little fun animated video about first aid. We've got 9 others just like that. So there's ways to learn about what essentials you should carry. And then don't forget to take personal and season sport specific gear as well. So we really, I like to go back to some old school consistencies and reliable resources. I say that a lot, and our 3 Ts and that trifecta of safety can really bode well for you, even when new technology and trends like this come into our paths. We can still be consistent with the old school habits, and they bode well for you.
Even it's this time of year where you can do 12-hour hikes, but it's always a reminder that you may be at the end of your 12-hour hike, and then you've got another 24 hours for someone to save you because you may have injured yourself. So we always want to make sure that you're able to stay overnight, you're able to stay warm, you've got your essentials, and you're ready to wait, because if you do need help, it will not be there within the hour. It will take time. And
That's
it
right.
could take overnight.
I was thank you for staying over. I know we've gone over, everyone. Thank you. We're going to wrap up here shortly. I was doing an interview a few weeks ago at one of the busiest parks in Canada for search and rescue. So I was at the Lynn Headwaters Regional Park, if anyone's familiar with it. It's in North Vancouver. Nathan from New Zealand, we hiked it, and we went through that area. Thanks for joining us, by the way. And I was doing an interview, and the reporter spoke to a few hikers who, respectfully, I'll say, didn't have gear with them or proper footwear. And they were honest, though, and said they did use AI to check for this trail and that this is where they wanted to go. So this was a few weeks ago. That trail where they were headed wasn't even open yet because there were still snowpacked conditions in the backcountry. It was an area where it was closed for starters, let alone the regional conditions that weren't folded into that based on the equations of those 3 hikers that weren't visually that I could see prepared to go into that area, let alone whatever training they had or didn't have. Just an example of what I saw firsthand as we were talking about this in this interview. So, Peter and Steve, you offered a lot of information. I'm going to watch this one again. Trust me. I am sharing this one left and right, and I'm sure Scott can agree. You enlightened us on quite a bit. And you both had lots of really great catchphrases that really stuck with me, even though I've heard you speak a few times, Peter, and listened closely because you have so much to share in those. And Steve, you've got so much to bring to the table as well. There was a lot to share tonight, and just to make us all think, I think, a little bit more and maybe take a little step back, even though Peter's like, get on board, let's go. I'm with you. And we can't not be a part of this world, I think. And you brought some great reminders to the table and what we should all be doing. Businesses, outdoor enthusiasts, meetup clubs, hiking groups, really great insights. Scott, were there any more questions in the queue?
There were two. One of them I quickly answered, and you guys can tell me if I'm wrong. Quick question was, is there a way to see where AI gets its information? And I know when I've been playing with AI, often there's a little link or a little button at the end of a paragraph or something. You can click on it and it brings a few links to the side. Even then, when you go into those links, sometimes it doesn't say what's on the paragraph. Sometimes they aren't connecting. But I think that's the way you're supposed to do it. Is that correct?
I think I would say that for some of the models, for some of the modes, where it's searching for sources, it will say, "Hey, I looked at this source," but it's really important to know that the way the AI works is based on just reading everything it could find on the internet over, that's ever been written. And so, although it may also look at those most recent sources, it's kind of combining that with what it's already internalized. And sometimes when it is pulling information out of those sources, it pulls it out incorrectly. And so, I've seen an example where like it looked at a web page referring to a lake, but it didn't read it right, and so it pulled the wrong depth of the lake out of the web page. So even when it does say, and in the example I had where it had looked at sightsandtrailsbc.ca, but still told you that you could have a campfire. So it is important to go down to the source and see, is what it said actually supported by the source? And sometimes it might like link a bunch of sources, but still make some stuff up. So it's kind of unfortunately not entirely possible to know. And they haven't even revealed what they trained the model on. It was just everything they could find. And of course, there are, a lot of, this brings us into, an ethical area of AI where a lot of people argue that they shouldn't have read a lot of that material because it was copyrighted and all of this. So long story short, sometimes it will provide links. You can do a deeper dive, but it's not as simple as that.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that and use the word, the GPT, the keyword there is generative. It actually generates something new. And so it's not plagiarizing, even though we can have an ethical discussion about that, but it's actually generating something new. So it's sort of paraphrasing, generate whatever from, whatever source it's going from. So the other thing I'll say to that is even if you're doing a deep research model, using a deep research model or a model that gives you sources, sometimes it'll pull sources that you would never in your life go to for information on that particular topic. So it's really important to not only verify the information, when you go to the source that it's correct information or it's understanding, but also just like sort of, have a healthy level of skepticism about the sources it's actually going to, because sometimes it'll pull up some really obscure things, or, to what Steve was saying, maybe some fake websites that, are made to look like the real websites. So, again, discernment, careful, double check, verify, all of those things is the way to go for sure.
And there was a last question about where to go for more information about the AI learning, but I think that question came in just before you brought up that slide. So I'll just remind people that I put a link to that in the chat. And Sandra, I think we're almost at the end there.
We do. And I just want to say thanks, Steve, for adding in that as of this week, the book is now live, A Mind Made of Math, and you offered up where people could find you and it. So thank you for that, because this is what this is all about, is enlightening everybody more than this. So thank you for that. I know we have some people here from the United States, so I just wanted to give a couple special thank yous out to those that joined us from down south-ish. Also from New Zealand. Thank you, Mountain Safety Council, for joining us. Nathan, really nice to see your name on the list. Haven't seen you in a while and look forward to our next international outdoor safety meeting. And also we have a reporter from CBC. So I'd also like to thank you for joining us and taking the time to learn a little bit more and share some insights. We welcome your questions and reaching back out to us. So thank you for that too. Okay, let's get down to the goods. We have a Zoleo to give away and 105 Hikes from Stephen Hugh book to give away. Let's start with Zoleo. And the first question is, I'm going to go back to the very beginning. I'm going to combine it with a little bit of what I shared and what these guys shared too.
I'm just going to stop you to remind people to put it in the chat section. And when you put it in the chat section, I'm going to look at it afterwards because it comes in so fast, and we'll get to the first person, and then we'll contact you on the email that you use to register in the Zoom.
Get your fingers ready. On your mark, get set. Here's your chance to answer this question. What is the second most common reason for search and rescue in British Columbia? Scott's not included, unfortunately. I listed 3, and I share them all the time, just so people can really think about how we can assess them, think about them, talk about them, agree on how we manage them and whatnot. So
And we
go ahead.
definitely have, the answer, most everyone there. So I know the first one is is people who are getting injured, right?
Correct.
Injury. The
Yeah.
third one is people who exceed their abilities. So like they think they can get out before the sun goes down. They just didn't know they could. They didn't have the ability to do it, or they thought that they could climb that. No, they can't.
Or
But
they
the
thought
second,
they thought they could mountain bike down a trail and fall and get 6 stitches and have a couple of scars. Not
Yep.
sure who does that, but
and
maybe
that-
somebody I know.
Maybe snowmobiling, landing in the falling through the ice.
Never know.
Never know what happens. But the
Super.
second one was what?
Getting lost and disoriented.
There you go.
Second most common reason for search and rescue in British Columbia. And that's consistent, just to let you know. So that's if you're in the wintertime snowmobiling or backcountry skiing in the East Kootenays, which is the top 2 user groups that call STAR the most, region with the most calls, then it's the Sea to Sky corridor. Or if it's hikers, mountain bikers, ATV quad users, top 3 users in the summer, Southwest. So that's consistent no matter the season or the user group. Thanks for thinking about that. We appreciate it. So that will be the Zolio. We'll get in touch with you. Last question, and we're about to wrap up. I liked what Peter said here at the end, and I think I've already shared it, but we're going to do what Peter did at the beginning. He asked you to put the phrase into the chat about good things come to those who, we all know the answer was wait. That's not my question. Here's my question. So please put in the chat and you will win Stephen's book. AI is a starting point. Please finish that statement that Peter just said, and I just repeated about 2 seconds ago. Well, not 2
Not
seconds.
the ending point.
Maybe a minute. Very good. And I'm glad I used that because it's making me think about, because I use it for a few things, work related. And I love the way you both, Steve and Peter, really repeated that. Great place to start, spend some time there. Not your ending point. And I love the human factor. Make sure we bring a human factor into that equation. So again, you guys shared so much with us tonight. We can keep going on. We're over slightly. So thanks to everyone for sticking around. I really appreciate it. We will have this up on YouTube tomorrow. Fingers crossed that Scott and I get our ducks in order, if you will. And all of this makes a difference. And again, it makes a difference for those 3,200 volunteers like Scott. You have a face right in front of you to place in front of those STAR volunteers who donate more than 500,000 hours a year. And your efforts to be more prepared and be adventure smart does lessen the impact on search and rescue and adds to that safety culture in British Columbia, which is great because it comes up in conversation. It comes up at trailheads. It comes up in interviews. It comes up in online chats. It comes up in your family and in your circles. And that's what we want. We want habits. We want conversation. And we want everyone to reach their destination, which is home. So on that note, let's all head out and make our way off. And thanks again, Scott, for everything you do. We appreciate it. Peter, great to see you again. Hopefully I'll see you speak again in person. Steve, I can't wait to get a copy of that book. I just got to say that. And we'll keep in touch. Good night, everyone. And thanks for your time. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
So, you want to be adventure smart.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
But what is being adventure smart?
Being adventure smart is really all about taking responsibility for your own safety and following the 3 T's.
Got it. What are the 3 T's?
What are the 3 T's? The 3 T's are the trifecta of outdoor safety: trip planning, training, and taking the essentials. The 3 T's can vary from person to person, activity to activity, and season to season. But here are some important ways to ensure you are prepared and safe on your next adventure. Trip planning. We could go on forever about this one. Trip planning is an essential step and one of the easiest ways we can stay safe on our adventures. This is something that should be done every time we head into the outdoors, whether for a few hours or multiple days. Trip planning can be broken down into 4 simple steps. Planning your travel route and navigation is about picking a trail or route based on its difficulty that's relative to your experience, ability, and the amount of time you have. Know your limits. Not all trails are created equal, so know the terrain and conditions. A 10-kilometer hike scrambling straight up a steep mountain is a lot different than a 10-kilometer stroll around a lake. Before you go anywhere, check the weather and keep checking it as things can change fast. This includes wind, precipitation, temperature, and sunset times. Finally, make sure you leave a comprehensive trip plan with a trusted contact. Keep in mind, this may not be your mom or dad or best buddy. Choose someone you can count on if you were to get into trouble. A comprehensive trip plan might be as simple as sending your trusted contact a text or email with key information about your activity, or using the Adventure Smart app, which allows you to enter a detailed trip plan. Training doesn't mean being an elite athlete or being queen of the mountain on Strava. Training is a continuous process of outdoor recreation. It's about developing the necessary skills and abilities to be safe. This might include working your way up to that big summit hike, taking a few courses to expand your wilderness and backcountry knowledge, navigation and route finding courses, or even learning more advanced skills like rescue and emergency training. You have planned and trained. Now make sure you take the essentials. Taking the essentials means packing everything you potentially need to stay warm, safe, and dry if an emergency unexpectedly arises. What if you rolled your ankle or got hurt? What if you got lost and had to spend the night outdoors? Take the time and be prepared to look after yourself. So that's it. Those are the 3 T's.
That's it.
But no matter how hard you train, how well you trip plan, and how much essential gear you bring, you may still find yourself in an emergency. And that's okay. The wilderness can be unpredictable. If you find yourself in an emergency, it's important to stop, think, observe, and plan. Use that essential gear you brought to stay warm, dry, and safe, and contact 911 on your emergency communication device. Remember, search and rescue in BC is free for everyone. Remember, safety is an outcome of good trip planning, training, and taking the essentials. It's your responsibility. So let's all do our part and be adventure smart.